So Abraham, the person that's been the chief human figure in the last 12 chapters of the book of Genesis, is about to die. And so as we come to Genesis 24, we see that God is raising or setting up Isaac, the son of promise, to be the one who would advance God's plans and promises. What is remarkable about this text is the way that the human characters in this passage embrace and participate with what God is doing. And in this, there is much wisdom and even instruction for us. So, notice first that Abraham is described as being old, as advanced in years. He's concerned about his lineage, and so, as was the custom of the day, he commissioned his chief of staff, if you will, to return to his homeland and there find a woman from his own people group to be a wife for his son. Such was the importance of the mission that Abraham made his servant swear fidelity to the mission by what is rather euphemistically described as, quote, placing his hand under his thigh. Abraham and even his servant's dedication to the mission is first rate. And herein lies the first bit of application, I think, for us. As Colossians 3:23 tells us, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. Whatever our mission is, whatever talents God has given us, whatever work he has called us to, we must wholeheartedly dedicate ourselves to it. The second thing that we may notice is Abraham's faith. Again, we've talked much about his faith and at times his lack of faith. But here in verse 7, we see Abraham's confidence that the power of God in the form of an angel will go before the servant, that God will grant success to this mission. Dedication to a mission requires faith. Faith not only in God's call or plan, but a sort of practical, real-world faith in God's providence and action. Third, notice that as Abraham's servant arrives at his destination, he prays. He acknowledges that God is the God of steadfast or covenantal love, and clearly, specifically asks God to act. I think this is a reminder that knowing God is relational, and it demands sort of constant communication. Communication not so much to change God's mind as to change our hearts and minds so that they might align with his. Fourth, notice that the servant was focused and even had a sense of urgency about him. He had been traveling for a long time across a rather desolate desert. Yet, when he finally arrives at his destination, he refuses to sit down and eat at Laban's house until he has fulfilled his mission. And God's plan is certainly worth our single-minded devotion and focus. But I wonder, do we always act like that? Fifth, notice that as every part of the mission unfolds, the servant pauses and worshiped God. How often we are earnest about praying to God and asking for something that we want, yet when we receive it, we just sort of completely act as if God doesn't exist. May we be more like this man and recognize what God is doing in real time and praise him for it. Lastly, as we think about this chapter, notice that in verse 60, Rebekah's family celebrates what God is doing. This goes along with the idea of worship, yet here the scope is expanded a bit. They're not just praising God for a singular answer to prayer. No, they're celebrating God's working in light of his covenant. They're acknowledging the role that they play in God's grand plan of redemption. It's easy to sort of focus on what is right in front of us, but ought we to zoom out and grasp God's eternal mission as well? So what is your calling? What is your mission right now? What is God calling you to do? And so as we prayerfully consider that question, may we all learn from this text and grow in our understanding of God, our faith, and yes, our dedication and urgency of the mission.